Planet Earth is comprised of 1/4 land and 3/4 water, geographically. The average human body is composed of up to 90% of its weight in water from birth. The human fetus spends 9 months approximately in utero and in water. All living creatures that have breath are born in and or from water. The Earth contains roughly 368 trillion cubic meters of water. Humans throughout history have used less than 10% of the world's water resources at any time. The average modern-day human being uses approximately 100 gallons of water a day. That is 5 times the weight of the average human being, over 800 pounds. The average healthy human being will drink up to 3 gallons of water a day. All of the planet's most ancient mythos, theos, and cosmologies record creation events that begin with water. All laws, since primordial antiquity, were written to regulate land and sea separately. Laws pertaining to land became the law of the land, or rather natural or common law, and laws pertaining to the sea became law of the sea, or rather maritime admiralty law, which is international law and the same everywhere in the world, no matter where you go. All laws since time immemorial originate from and are based upon ecclesiastical or canon law via the ancient laws and ecclesiastical right of kings. Natural or common law primarily preserves the inalienable rights and needs of human beings who live on land, differing between nations. The law of the sea, or maritime admiralty law, primarily grants the right that is legal to conduct merchant, banking, corporate, international commerce. Seeing how living persons cannot live on or in water for extended periods of time, and the Earth's seas have been used primarily for travel since antiquity, regulation of the sea for merchant, trafficking, shipping, and commerce through law became necessary for the merchants of nations to do business internationally. The law of the sea, maritime admiralty law, is universal and transcends all national boundaries and laws legally. What is legal is not necessarily lawful. Natural or common law, the law of the land preserving the rights and freedoms of living persons, is lawful. Maritime admiralty law, or UCC, Universal Commercial Code, is legal, and that legal robbery and murder. In ancient Rome, a Roman maxim law stated that he who will be deceived, let him be deceived, which means the responsibility of the deception is on the one that is deceived by it. Basically, if you get it up the hoop, or what we commonly refer to as being stiffed, shafted, that's your problem. Unbeknownst to everyone, maritime admiralty law, the international law of the high seas, came upon land like a flood and made every man, woman, and child since that time dead in the water. The word maritime comes from the Proto-Italic cognates mer, mar, mare, and mari, which all mean water. These cognates are found in words like commerce and merchant and maritime. The water that flows by currents in rivers is directed by the river banks. Water that flows in the world of maritime admiralty law is money, because money is water. Money is currency. It's liquid, as in liquid assets. Money, or monai, mono-eye, or simply one eye in maritime admiralty banking laws, is the lifeblood, the cash flow of the system of merchandising and traffic. To traverse this fictional world, there must be ships. Ships traverse water or the sea, and when they come to land, they come into a port. When you plug your electronic device into a computer, you're plugging it into a USB port, a universal serial bus port. The world of the internet is analogized with water as well. We have the deep web, and when you do a live social media broadcast on the internet, you are streaming the show. When a ship pulls into the port, it comes down a canal to where there is a dock, and there the ship is tied off. The ship's captain submits to the dockmaster a manifest of birth, a license and manifest of goods and services being delivered by the ship to the dock. The dockmaster signs the manifest claiming the cargo as property now of the ward, which includes livestock. All ships are female. A woman is a ship. A man is a fabricator. A man delivers semen into a vessel. The woman bears the cargo of the semen and labors for 9 months, wherein her water breaks, and the semen in the hold come down the birth canal through a port of entry and are delivered in a hospital delivery room. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a hospital is also a bank and also a church. The woman has shipped newly birthed Admiralty maritime product, stock, livestock, cargo. A doctor will untie the ship from the cargo, stock, the product, by cutting the umbilical cord to the ship or vessel and sign a birth certificate, a manifest of birth, after the cargo has been stamped or daubed by a footprint and fingerprint with blood and ink. And after the informants, which are your parents, sign the manifest, which is plainly written on the certificate itself, your parents, the informants, are informing the doctor that the cargo, the stock, is now delivered and can be claimed by signature. The doctor signs the certificate, making you now lost at sea as unclaimed corporate property, cargo, stock, product, commodity. You are now legally dead in the water, and your name appears in all capital letters and on every other legal document. And as I said, legal is not necessarily lawful. The word capital, capital, etc. comes from the Latin caput, which means skull, and the word El, which is named for the Phoenician, Hebrew, and Roman god Saturn, which can be found in the Bible. Capitol is where we get Capitoline Hill, Golgotha. Capitol Hill is in Washington, D.C. Caesar in antiquity ruled from the hill, just as modern-day presidents, monarchs, and popes rule from hills. A gangster may shoot someone in the head and say, "I capped him," a euphemism for a bullet causing death to the head. The word captain comes from the word capital, which means money or one eye, and equals water, the currency ration. All corporations are fictional. They exist on paper as a dead body vessel, just as your name in all caps on a birth certificate. The Constitution of the United States was formed in 1776, but the Constitution of the Incorporation of the United States was in 1871. The Corporation of the United States was formed in Delaware, Maryland in 1871 and became the United States, Inc. All citizens of U.S. Inc. have a license to work for U.S. Inc. They are employees. All corporations must have three things: a president, a vice president, and a secretary-treasurer. Everything in the world of merchant corporate banking law revolves around ships, as ships are carried by the water, which is the current sea, and all corporations are ships. If you want to have a car, you must have an ownership. If you want to be a citizen of a nation or country, you must get a citizenship. If you go into business with someone, you enter a partnership. If you want to learn a trade, you may enter an apprenticeship. Want to go to college and get your degree? Get a scholarship. Want to go buy a new car? You go down to the dealership. If you are traveling by car, you may enter a township before you enter the very town. When a man and woman get married, and the word invokes maritime admiralty law, they enter a business contract and obtain a marriage license to do business as a partnership. If you go to a church, which means a bank according to Black's law, you are going to a place of worship. Everything is a vessel, a fictional ship created out of thin air on paper in the sea of corporate commercial banking laws of pirates of the high seas. A person, according to Black's Law Dictionary, is a monster. According to canon law, Goyim, translated from the Hebrew to mean nations, cattle, chattel, animals, beasts, non-human according to rabbinical sources which are authoritative in ecclesiastical or canon law, which includes Talmudic rulings. Goyim have no rights. Admiral or admiralty laws apply to the authority of the captain, who is the admiral of the ship. The captain, or rather the admiral, who has absolute power and control of the ship, can make up the rules as he goes along. The word admiral comes from the cognates admire, and the Phoenician Hebrew Roman name of deity, Saturn El. Wherever there is a crown, you had better admire and have admiration for the king who is the captain, commander-in-chief, or else. Under common law, there is no such thing as a victimless crime, and a victim receives compensation and redress for damages. Aboard a ship, the captain can make any act a crime and he can impose sanctions accordingly. If you have a house and want to sell it, you put it up for sale. You are placing a sale on a ship which will set sail and dock to another port when sold. When you send a package somewhere abroad, you are shipping it, even though it's more than likely traveling by land. If you are losing your house, it's said that your house is underwater. If you get in trouble with the IRS, or if you go to prison, it's said you have landed in hot or deep water, and someone has to come and bail you out. A ship pulls into a port and gets tied off at a dock. When you go to a court, your case is placed in a docket. All courts in the land are judiciaries. They are judicial courts operating under mixed Roman, common, canon, and admiralty maritime law under a crown. They are ships docked on land. This according to the Judiciary Act of 1789 passed by Congress, which made all district courts admiralty courts having maritime admiralty jurisdiction. The United States of America and the United States are two different entities. One is a corporation, the other employees of the corporation. The United States of America never ever did win its independence from the Crown in the Revolutionary War. The Charter of Virginia of 1606 granted colonists a license to settle and colonize America by the King. The Treaty of 1783, after Cornwallis surrendered to Washington at Yorktown, completely contradicts and negates the generally assumed and taught notion that America won its independence from Britain. The first article of the Treaty of 1783 relinquishes all claims to America except for the continued tribute to the King under the Charter of Virginia of 1606. The charter was invoked by King James I, who gave you the King James Bible, and it states in Section 9 of the charter, and I quote, "Yielding therefore to us, our heirs and successors, the 5th part of all the same gold and silver, and the 15th part of all the same copper, so to be gotten or had, as is aforesaid, without any other manner or profit or account, to be given or yielded to us, our heirs or successors." The Revolutionary War was over in 1781, but the Treaty of 1783 was signed 3 years later, which means the war was not over, nor was it won. The Treaty of 1783 upheld the tribute to the King's venture by the colonists, which means America remains to this day a British colony that pays tribute to the Crown, as imposed by the Charter of 1606. America was conquered. Liberty is not freedom. A sailor on a ship gets liberty when he's allowed to have a short leave from the vessel when the ship pulls into port. A dog has liberty on a leash when you take him for a walk. A prisoner gets liberty when he's allowed out of the cell into the courtyard for a few hours while under the careful watch of snipers. Liberty is a license. It is a privilege allowed by a ruler, owner, king, etc. to a subject of the same. America never has been the land of the free at any time. It's the land of liberty on the leash of the Crown. In the year 1106, the judgments or rules of Oleron were first implemented by Eleanor of Aquitaine, after her return from the Second Crusade, having accompanied her first husband, King Louis VII. These were codified maritime admiralty laws that were supposed to protect the Crusaders' estates and titles while they went and fought the Crusades. This was based on the Greek maritime law of Rhodes of 900 BC called Lex Rhodia, which in turn came from the mariner laws codified ecclesiastically by the Phoenicians, who began their merchant mariner empire in 1586, lasting 1,000 years. In the year 1666, a great fire broke out in London while the Black Plague was ravaging Europe. The fire was intentionally set in Pudding Lane, as some historians believe, to clear out the slums to make way for what would eventually be the City of London. Parliament, behind closed doors in secret, invoked the Sestuacavi Act of 1540, enacted by the then King Henry VIII, reworked and instated by Charles I of the time. Sestuacavi from the Old French into English means "this killed that life." This made all men, women, and children presumed and assumed dead, and a trust set up. According to Black's Law Dictionary, Sestuacavi means the person whose life measures the duration of a trust, gift, estate, or insurance contract. The life of a trust is 7 years under the law of limited liability. This act is most diabolically evil because it killed everyone and gave them 7 years to claim back their lives. The fires of 1666 also created the only parcel of land on the planet that does not have a title deed. the Golden Mile, the City of London, which is a corporation having its own flag, its own constitution and laws, its own defense and police forces. The Golden Square Mile holds the Bank of England, the London Metal Exchange, Fleet Street, FTSE Stock Exchange, the Royal Mint, and the Old Bailey Courthouse. The United States channels billions yearly to the Bank of England to pay the Crown's tribute. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up, the brainchild of a secret meeting held on Jekyll Island in 1910. As United States Inc.'s debt soared well above the estimated gold reserves the corporation of the U.S. held as a standard for the dollar, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on Christmas Eve while Congress is away, giving the power for a foreign corporate entity to print fiat and collect interest on monies created from thin air. A bank does not loan you money. That's illegal. A bank gives you credit, which is legal, but not necessarily lawful. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was introduced, paving the way for the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. The Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia that was funded and began by Wall Street bankers such as Jacob Schiff and J.P. Morgan. That same year, Woodrow Wilson signed in the War Powers Act that basically stated that the U.S. was stopping all trade with the enemy except for those whom are granted a license, which excluded Americans. Licenses began to be issued in 1933. In 1933, the U.S. had reached Section 11 bankruptcy. President Roosevelt amended the War Powers Act of 1917 and declared all U.S. citizens as enemies of the state. There was a declared national emergency on March 9th, with an emergency act being passed placing all power, property, and resources of the U.S. into the hands of the President under martial law that has continued ever since. This is renewed yearly by executive order. The Federal Reserve began to print fiat money. The all-seeing eye was placed on the dollar bill. All men, women, and children born ever since arrive as collateral for U.S. Inc.'s debt, as slaves and enemies of the state. The balance of debt versus collateral is determined through illegal wars for profit, where the debt versus collateral is balanced, or rather the herd of slaves is thinned out. What all this means, ladies and gentlemen, is you are all slaves and cannon fodder for the nations you are in and who are subservient to the rulers running them. You have been turned into collateral for national debts. Consider this when hearing about the imminent collapse of the economy soon to take place. When debts cannot be paid, you are said to be in deep water, and those in deep water usually drown. Shylock, according to Shakespeare, asked for a pound of flesh to pay the bill. The owners of U.S. Inc. demand the same according to Admiralty Maritime statutes you are all under. The sun never did set on the Roman Empire, and Rome is just as alive today as it was a couple thousand years ago. You are all owned property and subservient to a crown, whether you like it or not. You are all considered dead and unclaimed by the crown, who laid claim and made you their bitch. You cannot, nor are you allowed to speak for yourself, as dead persons cannot speak, and is why you need a lawyer to speak for you in a court. The dead have no rights. This is all based upon ancient ecclesiastical or canon law at its root and core. When you board a ship called a church, which is also considered a bank under Maritime Admiralty, and embark upon it, the licensed and registered pastor or priest must teach and keep you obedient to the monarch, the crown, Because he who wears the crown, which is the monarch, is the head of the ship called church. He is the king, the lord and captain of the ship called church, and the pastor or priest is an agent of the crown. Maritime Admiralty, or rather Universal Commercial Code, or UCC, is the matrix pulled over everyone's eyes that governs all, because everything has been made into ships on the sea of corporate commerce. Without their one eye, which is money, which is water, all ships are dead at sea and cannot traverse their fictional matrix they created. It's now high time for a concerted universal mutiny.
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion.
Today, Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state of the great nation of the Hebrew Covenant called Great Britain. Her genealogy chart, according to the College of Heralds in London, traces her blue bloodline back to Abraham, who many modern scholars believe to be the Egyptian pharaoh, Amenemhet I. By connecting 22 dots, the true Hebrew and royal Egyptian identity of Queen Elizabeth II comes into focus. Number 1. What is the stone of Jacob, a Hebrew patriarch, doing beneath the Queen's throne chair? Number 2. Why was the Queen crowned at her coronation ceremony on top of a symbolic Egyptian step pyramid? Number 3. The monarch's crown has 12 stones at the base, each representing the 12 Hebrew tribes. The 12 stones of the 12 tribes were also worn on the breastplate of Hebrew high priests in Canaan. Number 4. The Union Jack represents the reunion of the United Kingdom of the 12 tribes of Jacob, or Jacob. The Union Jack is red, white, and blue, the same colors as the 3 crowns of Egypt. Number 5. The royal scepter originates in ancient Egypt and was carried by the Egyptian god Amun and by Egyptian pharaohs, who called themselves the Son of God. The royal scepter is now carried by pharaonic descendant Queen Elizabeth II. Her scepter contains the world's largest cut diamond, called the Star of Africa. Number 6. The Queen's punishing flail or whip is partially hidden under her arm. The flail or whip also originates with the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Number 7. The symbol of the bee can be found within the Queen's royal wardrobe. In ancient Egypt, bees were the symbol of Egyptian royalty, as well as the symbol of Egypt. Number 8. The symbols on the British coat of arms reveal Britain's Hebrew origin. According to the Bible, the harp symbolizes the Hebrew King David. The biblical lion and unicorn holding up the shield symbolize the nation of Israel. The motto, Dieu est mon droit, means God and my right, indicating the divine right of the British monarch to an eternal throne. Number 9. The headdress worn by judges and the Queen's high-ranking officials originate in ancient Egypt. Number 10. Kilts like the one worn by Prince Charles originate with the Egyptian pharaohs who wore white kilts. Number 11. The hymn, Zadok the Priest, written by Handel, was performed at the Queen's coronation in 1952. Zadok the Priest was the biblical priest who anointed the Hebrew King Solomon while the people cried, "God save King Solomon! Long live King Solomon! May the king live forever!"
God save Queen Elizabeth! Long live Queen Elizabeth! May the Queen live forever!
Number 12. During the coronation ceremony, the Queen turns to face the four corners of the globe. The orb carried by the Queen represents the globe over which the monarch rules. Number 13. The monarch's coronation gifts of a rod, bracelets, and a ring are a reenactment of the Bible story of the Hebrews, Judah, and Tamar. Number 14. Royal jubilees originate in ancient Egypt. Egyptian pharaohs celebrated their jubilees after 30 years of rule. In pharaonic tradition, the Queen has celebrated both silver and golden jubilees. Number 15. Incest was practiced by ancient Egyptian royalty. Mothers married sons and brothers married sisters to keep the power and the money all in the family. Like their pharaonic ancestors, the British monarchy have a long history of incestuous inbreeding. Number 16. The corpses of deceased pharaohs were preserved and entombed beneath their pyramid temples. The corpses of 19 deceased British monarchs are also preserved in marble tomb slabs beneath the modern-day temple called Westminster Abbey. Number 17. The ancient pharaohs advertised their power with their image on coins and stone monuments. The power of the Queen worldwide is advertised with her image printed on more coins and stamps than any other head of state in history. Number 18. The structure of government in ancient Egypt was a step pyramid model, with the Grand Vizier and priesthood one step below the pharaoh. Today's monarchy reigns using a much more sophisticated pyramid model of authority. Number 19. The Pope's headdress is strikingly similar to the headdress of the Egyptian god Amun. His bent cross resembles the scepter of Amun. Number 20. Like the Egyptian pharaohs, British monarchs wear signet rings, which over the millennia have been passed down from their Hebrew ancestors. Number 21. The British Mint recently printed legal tender coins called the One True Ring and the Ring of Power. On one side of the coin is Queen Elizabeth II. On the flip side is the ring from Lord of the Rings. These legal tender coins printed by the British Mint raise the disturbing question, who is the real Lord of the Rings?
One ring to rule them all.
The inscription on the ring reads, "One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness of their ignorance, bind them." Number 22. The covenant that the biblical God gave to Abraham was a promise to make his name great and to make for him a great nation. Today, Great Britain is the only nation called great. In Hebrew, the word Britain literally means land of the covenant, and British means man of the covenant. The media has misled the public into believing that the British monarch is a symbolic, ceremonial figurehead with little or no real power, that she is a harmless old relic who passes her time sipping tea at the palace. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Queen embodies the crown and supreme world power. Presidents of the United States are forbidden any title of nobility and are subservient to the monarch. Prime ministers in Commonwealth nations like Canada and Australia are her prime ministers, and she is their head of state. Just like the Masonic symbols that are hidden in the American dollar bill, the 1% that rule the 1% that rule the 99% are also hiding in plain sight. They are hiding by reigning instead of ruling. The British monarch reigns, but she has chosen not. Instead, she delegates her powers to presidents and prime ministers. This protects her from becoming a target of political hostilities. Meanwhile, the general public is kept in the dark about her true powers. So what exactly are the supreme powers that the monarch possesses? She has the power to grant titles like Sir. The Queen has the power to call elections and dissolve Parliament. She can dismiss prime ministers and the government. She can declare a state of emergency and command the armed forces. She can even declare war through her prime minister without even the consent of Parliament. There's a reason why the Queen's image appears on more coins, stamps, and paper currency than any other head of state in world history. Who is Princess Diana, and how did she get mixed up with the world's most heartless, power-crazed inbreds? Officially, Diana's father was the 8th Earl John Spencer. He was a descendant of the 5th Earl John Spencer, who was a groom of the stool. What, pray tell, is a groom of the stool? A groom of the stool is responsible for stools, the kind you sit on and the kind you expel. In other words, a groom of the stool wipes royal bottoms. The 5th Earl John Spencer wiped the ass of His Highness the Prince of Wales from 1862 to 1866. Would Charles, who is today's Prince of Wales, marry and mix his family's precious royal blood with Diana if she was from a bloodline of lowly asswipers? Of course not. According to the New York Times best-selling author Tina Brown, Sir James Goldsmith is Diana's real father. He had a long-term affair with Diana's mother during her marriage to Earl John Spencer. Multiple news sources maintain that James Goldsmith and Diana's mother Frances were lovers when Diana was conceived. Diana's mother was deeply unhappy in her marriage to Earl John Spencer, who drank heavily and acted beastly towards her. She finally divorced him and remarried in 1969. What kind of a man was James Goldsmith, the alleged real father of Princess Diana? Goldsmith was a Jewish bankster and one of the 20 wealthiest men in the world. Despite his criminal money laundering and bankruptcy schemes, he was never charged with anything. Why? Because Goldsmith was a ruthlessly vulgar man who was above the law.
But people are upset by vulgarity. And vulgarity is to some degree a sign of vigor. It means that new people, coming from nowhere, are making it. It's the old American dream. Anybody can become a millionaire. So if we want change, if we want vigor, we're going to have vulgarity. It's one of the things which irritates, which is necessary.
James Goldsmith's ancestors were neighbors of the Rothschild banksters in Frankfurt, Germany. The Goldsmith and Rothschild families intermarried. Princess Diana shared a striking family resemblance to James Goldsmith's 3 children, Zach, Ben, and Jemima. They are allegedly Diana's half-brothers and sister. Diana most closely resembles Zach Goldsmith. How close are the Goldsmiths to the Rothschilds nowadays? What kind of childhood did the Queen's German husband, Prince Philip, have? The answer can be found in a biographical book called Elizabeth, Behind Palace Doors. Philip's mother was Princess Alice Battenberg, granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic and committed to a mental institution in Switzerland. Philip's German father ran off with a wealthy mistress, which left the boy parentless. Philip's uncle, George Mountbatten, became his surrogate father and legal guardian. Unfortunately, Uncle George had the same perverse reputation as Uncle Dickie. George Mountbatten kept a scandalous collection of child pornography that he bound into volumes and emblazoned with the family crest. Most disturbing were pictures of family orgies and bestiality in which children and animals were sexual participants. The question is, was George's adopted son Philip a participant? George Mountbatten's porn collection now resides at the British Museum, where it is kept in a hidden repository of artifacts deemed pornographic and unfit for public viewing. It is a well-known fact that child victims of sexual predators commonly identify with their abusers and grow up to become sexual predators themselves. Like her husband, Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth came from a royal family of name changers, and for precisely the same reason, to cover up their German identity. Before 1917, the British royals bore the German name of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which was changed to the more British-sounding name of Windsor. The Queen and Philip are both the great-great-grandchildren of Queen Victoria, who married her German first cousin. That makes Elizabeth and Philip inbred kissing cousins. When it comes to inbreeding horror stories, the Ozark mountain families are no match for the royals. The Queen's first cousins, Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon, were severely mentally handicapped and incarcerated in a state-run asylum in 1941. Cousin Nerissa is now deceased, but the Queen's look-alike cousin Catherine is still alive. She's mentally retarded, neglected, and never visited. The Queen also has 3 second cousins who were sent to the same mental hospital on exactly the same day as Catherine and Nerissa. Burke's Peerage is a prestigious directory that records the who's who lineage of the British aristocracy. It falsely recorded that the Queen's first cousins Nerissa and Catherine died in 1940 and 1961.
Every family has secrets they would rather the world not know, even the most famous of them all. At every family occasion over the past 70 years, 2 of the Queen's cousins have been absent from the feast, declared dead to family and society.
We were sworn to secrecy. This is something that we didn't talk about.
All the staff were put on, be quiet, don't say anything.
For decades, the cousins remained hidden in an institution for so-called mental defectives.
It just seemed a waste of life. This way, I couldn't put a child of mine into a place like that, whatever they was going to be like.
Many thousands of others, condemned as idiots and imbeciles, shared their fate and were hidden out of sight and out of mind.
In those days, people weren't interested in learning disability people. They were just put there because of shame.
But the royal secret was exposed.
Afternoon, ladies. Nice to see you all.
A private investigator's hidden camera revealed the truth.
Where's Catherine? Somebody said I should have a word with her this afternoon.
Catherine Bowes-Lyon, niece to the Queen Mother and cousin to the Queen, is still alive today. Sheila Rule had cared for Nerissa and Catherine for over a decade and was one of the few to attend Nerissa's funeral.
Well, at Nerissa's funeral there was no family present. It was only staff. And Catherine went, she didn't cry or anything, but she was quiet. She was quiet. But of course she must feel like there's something not right.
There was no connection with the royalty, and that's no credit to them. They could have given her a very lavish funeral, really, but they didn't. And she had a pauper's grave.
The Queen hasn't parted with a single penny to care for her look-alike living cousin Catherine. No birthday gift, no Christmas card, not a single visit from the Queen or royal family in 60 years. Nerissa and Catherine are not the only mentally defective relatives of the Queen. The Queen's great-uncle, Prince Albert Victor, was mildly retarded and partially deaf. He was also a suspect in the murderous rape of slum prostitutes using a carving knife. The Queen's grandfather, King George V, had an epileptic son. When the boy suffered an epileptic seizure at age 4, the king hid him in an isolated farmhouse. The boy never saw his royal parents again and reportedly died in his sleep. King George III was the Queen's third great-grandfather. Because of his prolonged episodes of severe psychosis, he was put in a straitjacket behind bars at Windsor Castle, where he became progressively insane and blind. Queen Anne and George IV inherited the same genetic madness. The Queen's mother-in-law, Alice Battenberg, had visions that she was Christ's bride. She was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic and committed to an asylum in 1930. Alice is Prince William's great-grandmother. Hollywood and the Palace spin doctors invest millions in propaganda movies that rewrite history to make the world forget the crimes, cruelty, madness, and the heartless past of the British royals. The Oscar-winning movie The Queen was all about resuscitating the Queen's dying popularity after Diana's murder. Another propaganda Oscar winner, The King's Speech, focused on the Queen's father, King George VI, and his speech impediment. The movie failed to mention royal inbreeding as a cause of his disability. Monarchy movies sell the belief that the royals are sensitive, caring, human, and deserving of worship and taxpayer support. In mid-October of 1964, kissing cousins Elizabeth and Philip paid a royal visit to a Catholic residential school for Aboriginal children in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. William Coombs was 12 years old at the time of the royal visit. "I was an inmate at the Kamloops school when we were visited," said Coombs. "I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them, and the school principal told us it was the Queen, and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived. The day the Queen got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband and some of the priests. We went down to a meadow near Dead Man's Creek. I remember it was weird because we all had to bend down and kiss her foot, and she was wearing a white lace boot. After a while, I saw the Queen and her husband leave the picnic with 10 children from the school, and those kids never returned. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again. We never heard anything more about them, and we never met them again even when we were older. They were all from around there, but they all vanished." The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They were all from the smart group in the class. 2 of the boys were brothers, and they were Mady from Quesnel. Their last name was Arnoux, or Arnold. I don't remember the others, just an occasional first name like Cecilia, and there was an Edward. What happened was also witnessed by my friend, George Adolph, who was 11 years old at the time and a student there too. But he's dead now. William Coombs, the sole survivor, was scheduled to appear as the star witness at the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State in London, England. But William Coombs never made it to the tribunal. He died of unknown causes shortly before he was scheduled to testify. Reverend Kevin Annett, a former minister of the United Church of Canada, believes that William Coombs was murdered to stop him from speaking out about the royal abductions and other crimes of murder and torture that he had witnessed at the school.
In a nutshell, what happened was I was letting people speak from the pulpit about the crimes I'd seen in the residential school, the murders and that. I also found out about the land deals that were happening where the church was selling off native land to big logging companies for kickbacks. And I wrote a letter about that to the church. I was fired without cause and eventually thrown out of the church without any due process at all. But that one thing led to another, and I began to work a lot more with the survivors after that, the eyewitnesses to these crimes.
In Quebec City, a ceremonial parade was held for the royal couple, and a goat, with gold horns and a blue jacket, was marched in front of Prince William. The billy goat is descended from Queen Elizabeth's private stock of royal goats. Billy is a nickname for William. In this photograph, Prince William is wearing a Royal Air Force patch that displays a goat head symbol. The goat head is a symbol for the goat of Mendes, which represents Satan and the Antichrist. The Baphomet is another name for the goat of Mendes. It is the deity that is worshipped by the Knights Templar. Today, the Baphomet pentagram is the official symbol of the Church of Satan. In black magic, the Baphomet is the source and creator of all evil. It is portrayed as half human, half goat. This symbol can be traced from ancient Sumer in Egypt right through to its global use today in modern witchcraft. The ancient Sumerians made clay tablets describing the extraterrestrial god Enki, who genetically engineered the human race with his demon seed. The symbols for Enki and Satan are the same, the goat and the snake. The goat symbol played an important role on September 11, 2001. George W. Bush was reading a story about a pet goat to a group of school children when he was informed that a second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that America was under attack. What hymn did the ruling family sing on William's wedding day in Westminster Abbey? The flag-waving public were too hypnotized by the fairy tale media hype to even question why a hymn called Jerusalem was featured at William's wedding. Here are the main lyrics of the hymn. Why are the ruling family singing about the fight to build Jerusalem at William's wedding of the century? The answer lies in the UK's Union Jack flag. No one has bothered to question why the Union Jack flag is called the Union Jack. Who is Jack? The answer is Jack-Ub. Jack-Ub, or Jacob, is the patriarch of the Jews. According to biblical scripture, Jacob laid his head on a stone and dreamt about a ladder reaching to heaven. It's called the Stone of Jacob. The Stone of Jacob will also be placed beneath William's throne chair when he is crowned king. Most of us were taught revisionist history in school. To make sense out of what's going on in the world today, we need to learn a few simple facts about Israel's history without the revisions. According to the Bible story, Jacob fathered 12 Hebrew sons who invaded the land of Canaan. Canaan was the homeland of the Philistine people. After defeating the Philistines, the 12 Hebrew tribes carved up the land of Canaan into 12 tribal districts. They renamed the land of Canaan Israel, Israel, after their gods, Isis, Amun-Ra, and Elohim. By 69 AD, Roman soldiers burned the city of Jerusalem to the ground and destroyed the Hebrew Temple of Solomon. All that remained of the Jewish temple was a wall, which still stands today in the city of Jerusalem. After the 12 Hebrew tribes fled from the land of Canaan, which they had renamed Israel, the Romans gave the land back to the Philistines and called it Palestine. Palestine was the Romanized word for Philistine. Today, the descendants of the Philistines are the Palestinians of Palestine. Where did the 12 tribes of Israel go after they fled from the land they had renamed Israel? The serpent tribe of Dan became seafaring pirates. They emblazoned the symbols of the snake and dragon on their red and white flag, together with the crest of an eagle. Since vowels were interchangeable in the original Hebrew language, Dan could be pronounced Din, Don, or Den. It was embedded in the name London, Scandinavia, Sweden, and Denmark. Denmark literally means the mark of Dan. By 1016 AD, the Viking king Canute seized the throne of England, Denmark, and Sweden. Today's British royalty are descended from the serpent tribe of Dan and from the Viking kings whose symbol is the dragon. Prince Charles' coat of arms displays a red dragon and the German words Ich dien, which means I serve. I serve the red dragon. I serve Satan. Prince William's coat of arms also features a red dragon, which is partially hidden by a 3-point white label. Notice the checkered floor beneath William's wedding guests, which is a known symbol of Freemasonry. Rowan Williams, the Archbishop who married William and Kate, is a confirmed Druid member. Druid ceremonies include pagan sun worship in stone circles. Notice the sun symbolism on the back of the Archbishop's robe. Prince William and the British royal family claim descent from King David and the Jewish tribe of Judah, but the evidence shows they are descended from the tribe of Dan and the Viking kings, whose symbols are the snake and dragon. It took nearly 1,000 years for the tribes of Israel to reunite after fleeing from Jerusalem in 70 AD. They reunited in the British Isles under the flag of their Jewish patriarch, Jacob, or Jacob. It took another 1,000 years for the Jewish tribes to reclaim the land that the Romans had given back to the Philistines. How did they do it? In 1917, the British Earl of Balfour signed the Balfour Declaration, promising to give the nation of Palestine to Lord Rothschild and the Jewish Zionists. This criminal declaration was made even before the British had conquered the nation of Palestine at the end of World War I. During World War II, American corporations supplied gas, money, vehicles, and weaponry to Hitler and the Nazis. By the end of World War II, the British conquered and turned the Muslim nation of Palestine over to the Rothschild Zionists as promised. The Zionists populated the land with boatloads of Jewish refugees from Nazi concentration camps. By 1948, the name of the Muslim nation of Palestine was officially changed to the Jewish state of Israel. According to Jewish historian and best-selling author Simon Schama, the Rothschild Zionists financed illegal settlements on Palestinian land. They now own 80% of the Palestinian land that they renamed Israel. What is a Zionist? Zionists are a minority of Christian and Jewish extremists who believe that the Jews have a God-given right to the land of Israel. Why? Because according to the Judeo-Christian Bible, God said so. But wouldn't that make God a racist God who favors Jews over all others? How big is the Promised Land? God's Promised Land to the Jews extends far beyond the borders of present-day Israel. It includes Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, half of Iraq, half of Egypt, parts of Turkey and Saudi Arabia, the modern state of Israel, as well as the West Bank and Gaza. The 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center in New York City served as the perfect excuse to justify bombing, occupying, disarming, and bankrupting Israel's Muslim neighbors. It also scared hundreds of billions of tax dollars out of traumatized American citizens. 9/11 was a Zionist false flag operation. Within 24 hours of the attack, America launched a Blame the Muslims campaign that ignited the Zionist war of terror on the Muslim nations surrounding Israel. Ultimately, the grand scheme of the Zionist plot is to reclaim Jerusalem and rebuild Solomon's Temple, which was destroyed by the Romans almost 2,000 years ago. Today, Israel's Jews pray at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, which is all that remains of Solomon's Temple. The design and cornerstones for the new Solomon's Temple have already been completed. 10 to 12 corporations run the world's food supply, which are grouped around Britain's Royal House of Windsor. The Windsor-led cartel includes Cargill, Continental, Monsanto, and Archer Daniels Midland, which dominate world grain, meat, dairy, edible oils and fats, fruits, vegetables, sugar, and spices. This cartel is hoarding food, minerals, and raw materials, and it has the power to shut down food production and export supplies worldwide.
A point on the environmental movement in general, a question for any of the environmentalists, so-called, in the panel there. Prince Philip was one of the key founders of the Green Movement. He said that if he were to be reincarnated, he'd want to be reincarnated into a deadly virus to solve the overpopulation problem. Well, the point is that the Green Movement was founded by those in the eugenics movement. This is Hitler, Nazi, race science, and this will destroy Africa. Can anyone make a comment?
Prince Philip Mountbatten, alias Battenberg, and the power elite view themselves as inheritors of the earth. Culling the population through eugenics is their answer to freeing up planet Earth's resources that are being consumed by what they consider racially inferior commoners and useless eaters. The Queen is the wealthiest person on Earth. Her gold carriage alone is made of 4 tons of solid gold, worth over $370 billion at today's gold prices. Until 1992, the Queen's income was all tax-free. In 1977, the Bank of England Nominees Limited was established to hide the Queen's investments. Secrecy about her wealth protects her from a public lynching. Government and banking officials inform the Queen about where to invest her wealth. That's called insider trading, and it's illegal. But the Queen gets away with it scot-free. Why? Because she's the Queen, and she's immune to prosecution. The Queen owns more than 300 residences, including castles and palaces, crown jewels, over 27,000 masterpieces, prize racehorses, and a fleet of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. Her colossal wealth also includes crown land and investments that she inherited from her black nobility ancestors. The Queen's Crown estate includes over 50% of the UK's coastline, as well as Regent Street and Windsor Great Park. Her trillions in wealth are passed down to her descendants, untaxed. Would British tourism collapse if the monarchy was abolished? No, statistically, Buckingham Palace doesn't even make the top 20 list of tourist attractions. When the Queen's parasitical income from British taxpayers was reduced, she pretended to share the suffering of commoners from austerity programs. That drop in taxpayer income was a teeny-tiny drop in the royal bucket.
Those of you who have heard of the Bilderbergers might have heard the fact when Prince Philip actually said that he wants to get rid of 85% of the population. He said that if it doesn't happen in his lifetime, he wants to come back as a virus and do the job himself. He wants to get rid of these he called useless food eaters. But I'm telling you firsthand, they're the bloody useless food eaters. They couldn't put a nail in a piece of wood or fry an egg to save their life. Yeah! Do you know how much the Queen is worth? 17 trillion pounds. That's $30 trillion. She could end world hunger and poverty tomorrow. Instead, she just sits in her ivory tower and laughs at us. This is coming to an end.
$30 trillion? Of the billions of families on planet Earth, how did this one family manage to collect and hoard most of the world's wealth over the centuries? Besides insider trading and tax-free income, the answer is the slave trade and drug trade.
Temple Mount, 35 acres of it, is the most explosive piece of territory on the face of the planet.
Jewish leaders have already established a training center in Jerusalem, where temple priests are now learning how to offer the required animal blood sacrifices and to conduct the daily temple services.
Now, of course, there's limits on exactly what sacrifices we can do because of the state of impurity that we're in. Some sacrifices we can't do without the ashes of the red heifer, but the Passover offering, national sacrifices we can perform in a state of impurity.
So what's stopping the Zionist Jews from rebuilding Solomon's temple? What's stopping them is a Muslim shrine called Dome of the Rock, which was built in 691 AD right over the top of the ruins of Solomon's temple. It is one of the world's holiest Muslim sites. This sacred real estate is, without a doubt, the most dangerous real estate on planet Earth. The Muslim Dome of the Rock is the elephant in the room. The Zionist plan to rebuild Solomon's temple on sacred ground must, by necessity, be a plan that reduces the Muslim Dome of the Rock to rubble. Building Solomon's temple means the Muslim shrine must fall, either by a natural disaster like an earthquake, or a man-made disaster like an exploding bomb. A man-made disaster would surely be the spark that ignites World War III.
When a British monarch is crowned, an elaborate ceremony takes place which resembles the ritual crowning of King Solomon of ancient Israel. King Solomon ruled over ancient Israel and had extensive knowledge of the Kabbalah, which he used to communicate with demons. King Solomon is the single most important figure in the occult teachings of World International Freemasonry. The ancient Goetia is a book of powerful invocations and spells written by King Solomon. These ancient spells and evocations were used to summon spirits who were then psychically tortured and forced to serve King Solomon. The Goetia contains descriptions of 72 demons, some of whom control their own army of lesser demons. King Solomon evoked and imprisoned these spirits in a bronze vessel sealed using magic symbols. The Goetia explains how the spirits can be compelled into obedience. The Goetia describes a demonic royal hierarchy of spirits, many of which are referred to as knights, princes, and kings. King Solomon ruled ancient Israel from the year 970 to 928 BC. Satanists, occultists, and Freemasons worldwide venerate the memory of King Solomon, who owned a magic ring engraved with a symbol called the Seal of Solomon. This gave him power over the invisible monarchy of demons. This Seal of Solomon is better known as the Star of David. It is this symbol which is encoded into the $1 bill. It is also the flag of Israel. Magicians and mediums who consult with spirits have always been employed by the royal elite. In medieval Britain, Dr. John Dee was consulted regularly by Queen Elizabeth I. At the British Museum in London, we see the dark mirror which John Dee used to see or scry the faces of spirits. Dee's ability to communicate with spirits led him to be employed as a spy, developing psychic espionage techniques, which we now call remote viewing. John Dee attended Trinity College in Cambridge, which became a place where occultists and the world of spies were intertwined. Aleister Crowley also attended Trinity College. In 1904, he wrote an introduction to an ancient book of spells called the Goetia. Soon after, Aleister Crowley followed the footsteps of John Dee and worked as a spy for Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service, MI5. Dr. John Dee was secretly initiated into the secrets of the Kabbalah by Rabbi Lowe in the 1500s. The Kabbalah offers a route map which is called the Tree of Life. Discarnate spirits, some angelic, some evil, occupying each point on the Tree of Life. These spirits can be called forth and invoked to serve the magician. Medieval astrologers and Kabbalists such as John Dee were hired by monarchs to plan their wars or to experiment with alchemy, trying to transform base metals into gold and thus increase the already spectacular wealth of the monarchy.
There are three important texts that predict an apocalyptic Third World War, which would give rise to one world empire and one world king. The Bible's Book of Revelation, the Illuminati's Protocols of Zion, and Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. A statue of Albert Pike stands today on a pedestal in Washington, D.C. What did Albert Pike do to deserve a statue in his honor on federal land at the foot of Capitol Hill? Albert Pike was the sovereign pontiff of Universal Freemasonry and a known Satanist who possessed a bracelet which he used to summon Lucifer. After the American Civil War, he was imprisoned for treason, but thanks to Freemason President Andrew Johnson, Pike was pardoned. By 1869, Pike had become the National Chief Judiciary Officer and Grand Dragon of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan in Arkansas. By 1871, he published the Masonic handbook known as Morals and Dogma. Albert Pike was also the author of a military formula for 3 world wars that would advance the world government agenda to its final stage in the 21st century. World War I, said Pike, must be engineered to overthrow the Tsars of Russia and make Russia a fortress of atheistic communism. World War II must be engineered to destroy Nazism, strengthen political Zionism, and create a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. World War III must exploit the conflicts between the Zionist state of Israel and the Islamic states so that they mutually destroy each other. Divided and exhausted by war, the masses will receive the light of Lucifer brought finally out into the open. Albert Pike's vision for World War III is now taking shape in the Middle East, where the engineered conflicts between the Zionist state of Israel and the Islamic nations are coming to a head. Proof of a world government conspiracy is uncovered on our Seeing is Believing tour of 5 U.S. cities, starting with Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado is home to America's largest airport called the Denver New World Airport. The airport was built by Freemasons in 1995 and features a Freemasonic dedication capstone in the atrium. A time capsule is buried underneath the stone to be opened in the year 2094. The New World Denver Airport has a swastika-shaped runway. There is reportedly a deep underground military base beneath the airport, with miles and miles of secret subterranean tunnels connected to a large network of underground cities. As passengers drive up to the main airport terminal, they are greeted by a sinister-looking 32-foot-high fiberglass blue stallion, with veins popping out of its body and demonic eyes that glow bright red. Not exactly a calming influence for travelers who are already spooked about getting on a plane. The sculpture is believed to symbolize the pale horse of the apocalypse mentioned in the Bible, whose name is Death. The sculptor, Luis Jimenez, was killed by the horse when a chunk of the sculpture broke loose and came crashing down on him. Locals call the horse Lucifer.
The British throne has been bathed in blood for centuries. At one time, Britain contained several small kingdoms. These small kingdoms, ruled over by an intermarried, self-elected elite, were gradually amalgamated into the single monarchy which rules over Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and secretly controls the United States of America.